Hello, and welcome back to Your Story is Your Portal. And today, in this solo episode, we are going to be talking about soul mapping. I've had quite a few people ask me what exactly is soul mapping. It is something that I've been doing for the last 15 years. So I have been a publisher. I have published over 300 authors. And the process that I take people through, I have called soul mapping. And soul mapping is an opportunity where you get to reflect on your whole life. You get to reflect on all of the events that have happened to you throughout your life, as far back as you can remember, and how those events have shaped who you are today. And of course, for many people, the first question they ask me is, well, where do I start? It's so interesting because sometimes I think to myself that I have had 7 versions of Julie, or 7 lifetimes of Julie, and each of those lifetimes have definitely influenced who I am today. Each of those events that have happened to me have shaped my values, my beliefs, and who I am. Because unless you have different experiences, then we really are a result of our family, because where else could we get our values and beliefs from? Not usually a child finds their own values and beliefs because they are very heavily influenced by their environment and the environment that they are being raised in. And so if you are raised in a Muslim family, with Muslim beliefs and told that Allah is the one and only, and that everything you do will be influenced by whether you are doing good or doing bad in Allah's eyes. Or maybe you have been raised as a Christian, or maybe you were raised in an environment where you were in poverty or you were in famine. Unless you explore the rest of the world, you only get to know that environment. You don't know anything that might exist outside of that environment unless you are influenced by media, for example. And of course, many people are influenced by media. I remember from my traveling days that when I was in Africa, it was really interesting to see those people that were living in very remote places, but they had access to a TV. And so their view as to the outside world and what America and the UK and the Western world represented was significantly different to the way that they were living their lives. And of course, that is how we can live our life. We can live our life just assuming and making judgments based on, only what we see, and then how our family and our friends and our peers influence that around us. So, how do you get to live your own version of life? Your own, how do you create your own values and your own beliefs? Well, from my perspective, I feel the only way you can do that is if you travel. If you go outside of the environment where you were raised, you get to experience new things, new cultures, new ways of being, and you get to observe other people and how they live their life. And based on that, you can explore your life options. So that is what soul mapping is all about. It's all about reflecting on those things that and those experiences that you've had throughout your life and how those experiences have shaped who you are. Now, that could be something like parenting, for example. For many people that have had children, then parenting is a huge influence on their life. The way that they were raised may have taught them ways that they might want to raise their children compared to the way that they were raised themselves by their family. For some people, travel is a very big influencer. And of course, for myself, travel most definitely was the way that I got to explore and understand different values, different beliefs, different ways of being. And so, in the process of soul mapping, we get to really explore what is it that you actually learned through that life experience. And sometimes what you actually learned in that life experience perhaps goes into your unconscious mind, and you don't actually get to really examine it or explore it until much later in life. A good example for me is traveling around the world. And so I left England in 1998 and I went sailing around the world. Now, I had never sailed before, or I'd never been in the Indian Ocean before, or in a big expansive ocean. And so I didn't really know what I was letting myself in for. And I do remember when I reflect back, and this only happened when I did the soul mapping exercise, um, reflecting back on all of those things. Because, you know, when we are living those experiences, we don't get to slow down and stop and really consider, oh, this is what's happening to me right now. So, for example, um, I do remember that when I was soul mapping for the first time, I loved the act of putting colored pens in my hand and having a big sheet of white paper in front of me, because I was really able to, for the first time, probably go really inside, go inside and ask myself, how did this event truly influence who I am today? And, you know, the way that I discovered that was I started with places. So for me, it was easier to recall all of the events that happened to me during travel by recalling places. So, for example, I started with Africa. And so I drew a circle in the middle of the page and I put Africa. And then from that point, I did a ideas that came from and observations that came from Africa. And so I ended up with a circle with little lines coming off it, kind of like a spider. And that's one of the most popular ways to do mind/soul mapping. Um, it's coming from the mind, but the difference and why I call it soul mapping is because I'm inviting you to go inside to your soul, not to think of it purely from a mind perspective, but to really tap into your soul and really ask yourself, what was the impact that this event had on my life? And then the magic that happens because you have paper and you have colored pens, the magic that happens is that your left and your right brain connect. And because you are engaging your right brain, which is the creative brain, you are engaging your soul. So you are engaging that part of you from inside. And so that's why I call it soul mapping. Now, this will only happen if you truly allow the writing to come from that place, from your soul, not to think about what you're going to write or think about the event, but to tap into that place inside, to tap into your soul and really consider, what is it that I felt when I was experiencing this life event? What were the emotions? What were the feelings? Did this event leave me feeling joyful? Did it leave me feeling reflective? Did it leave me feeling like I was in fear of the future? For example, when I think about my sailing days, I had many different events that happened during the period of 7 years that I was sailing. Um, Going back to the topic of Africa, my observation of when I lived in Africa was very different to my life in England. And one of the things that my soul felt, and that's why I say I felt this on a soul level, was to witness the relationship between the whites and the blacks in South Africa. And on a soul level, I felt very sad, and I felt confused and not happy when I witnessed the way that the white Afrikaans addressed Black people that worked for them. Um, Now, my mind can tell me one thing. My mind can tell me, that is racism. My mind can give me the whole history of slavery, the whole history of the relationships between the white Boers and in Africa, and the war of the Boers and the Zulu War, and I can explore all of the history of South Africa, particularly. But what I really felt when I explored my soul, when I explored that area, and what were my feelings when I was reflecting on that time. And what I felt was very deep seated sadness that there was a judgment of anybody, any person, based on the color of their skin. I always felt like when I looked at a person, I was looking at their soul. I never felt like I was looking at a person who had black skin or brown skin or yellow skin or white skin. Um, I I've always felt this way. But in England, I've always had this belief system that was taught to me from my parents, actually asking me to observe a person's skin color as though it should give me some information before I have a relationship with them. And so the time in Africa really helped me to understand what my true feelings were around this topic of skin color. And what I really observed when I was in Africa was that I felt um, deeply sad and at times angry when I observed some of the ways that the white Afrikaans were treating the black boat boys, for example. And I felt disempowered, that I wasn't able to express how that saddened me. And on a few occasions, when I had reached out to the boat boy, for example, that was working on the boat next to me, and realized that he wasn't drinking any water, and I had given him a bottle of water because he didn't appear to have any water. And he was very grateful that I did that. And when my neighbor returned from the day and he saw the empty bottle, he was very angry with me that I had interrupted his worker. And he said that it was not my business to interrupt his worker. And so then I felt even more conflicted, that there was this conflict of how I was supposed to behave in a marina as a white woman in this environment. And as time went on, I connected with my soul more and more, and the feelings and the emotions that I felt when I was in that environment. I had on a few occasions like that spoken out about my feelings, and I realized pretty fast that was not appropriate as a white woman in South Africa to be voicing my opinion in that way. And so this was the first time that I had realized that, my opinion as a white woman wasn't welcome in certain environments. And in fact, not only was it not welcome, it in fact created problems. And so this was my first experience of living in this, sheltered environment that I was when I was raised in England. I was raised in a small village where we didn't even have people of any different color skin that lived in our village. And so my whole world was influenced by my father's opinion. And he had made it pretty clear how I should be feeling about people that had not been raised in that environment. Um, I think when I think back to that, and I think back of the view of my parents at the time, I realized that they had formed opinions, and I'm not exactly sure where those opinions came from, but they had formed opinions that, you had to earn a certain status to live in a village with new houses. And if you had not been raised or born in that area, then you didn't belong. And it seemed that that went to past generations, because it didn't even matter if you had been born in that area, as, for example, a first generation Indian. That had no significance. If you were brown skin and you were from Pakistani, then you weren't welcome, because you appeared not to fit in because of the color of your skin. And so when I go back to the soul mapping exercise and exploring what were my feelings around racism, what did my experience and my life experience living for 6 months in Africa, what did that teach me? What did that give me in terms of forming my own values and my own beliefs around this topic? And so you can see that if you give yourself the opportunity to really reflect on this, you can get to start to listen to your soul, and perhaps to question some of the ways that you were raised with the beliefs of your family or your peers versus beliefs based on how did this make me feel when I experienced this? How did my heart feel? How did my emotions feel? And so this is the challenge that I give people when I ask them to do the soul mapping exercise. I ask them to think about the major events that have happened in their lives, and how those events helped them to form their own belief systems, their own values, not those passed down by their family, but their values and beliefs based on the emotions that they felt when they had that life experience. And so I'm sure you appreciate that looking at your stories from that perspective is a very different way of looking at your story than looking at it just purely from your mind and from your intelligent mind that give you an opinion that's possibly not yours, that it's possibly based on some family belief system that you were raised with. So this is why I love soul mapping. This is why I love to encourage people to do this exercise. Using the big pieces of paper and the colored pens is a method that engages your soul. And that is why I really highly recommend that people try this exercise, to give yourself the quiet space to reflect on the inside, not from your mind, but from the inside. I believe the only other way we can do this is automatic writing, and sometimes journal writing is another way that we can reflect on our soul. But in order to do that, you really do have to let go and make sure that nothing is coming from the brain, from the mind, that you are letting everything well up from inside and from your emotions. And so I invite people to try this exercise, to try soul mapping, to see if it gives you the opportunity to really reflect on your life stories and reflect on how you formed your own belief systems, your own values based on your life experiences. And so just a reminder that I do offer this as a beautiful retreat on a one-on-one personal basis. And so here in Sayulita, Mexico, I am available for you to work one-on-one through this process. For some, that might be the starting point to write their memoir. For others, it's just an opportunity to really examine their own soul stories and to reflect on their true soul purpose. Because your story is your portal to your life purpose. Thanks for listening today. See you next week.